Welcome everyone. This is Gihan Pereira, and welcome to this online presentation. We've got 45 minutes together talking about customers, and specifically, I want to talk about how customers have changed, partly as a result of the pandemic, but also partly as a result of some of the other global and local trends that we're seeing that are affecting all of our lives. So in this time that we've got together, I want to share some ideas. I want to give you the chance to evaluate your own business and organization as far as customers are concerned, and I want to give you some things to take away and put into action. There are quite a lot of people who don't know me in this session, so if you can find out all, you can find out all about me at gihanpereira.com. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about me because today is all about you. But I will say that I'm a business futurist, so I work with organizations and leadership teams talking about trends. So it's not that I can predict the future, but I can talk about some trends that are going to affect all of us and make them relevant. So that's the purpose of this presentation today. I've worked with lots of leadership groups and lots of organizations, mostly within Australia, but in the region and internationally as well. And here's some examples, organizations I've worked with at a leadership level. And I'm sharing this just to show you that the challenges that we're all facing are similar, whether you're a large organization or a small organization, whether you're government or commercial or for-profit or for-purpose. It doesn't matter. As leaders and organizations, we've gone through a period of really rapid change and disruption. And what I want to share today, how some of our customer expectations and goals have changed. So my 3 rules of engagement for all my presentations, the three broad principles. I want to give you some things to think about. So if you can, eliminate any other interruptions and distractions for this 45 minutes that we've got together, and take some time to think. And think big here. So it's okay in this segment, in this session, to give yourself permission to think big and forget about how you're going to do things, because how sometimes gets in the way of us having big ideas. So have big ideas now, and it's okay to say at the end of this, when we finish, then you can go and look at how to make them happen. Be a bit playful here, so there's an opportunity for you to ask questions throughout the session, so I'll stop along the way, and if you've got questions, type them in the chat, and whenever I stop, I'll have a look to see what's in the chat, to see what questions there are, and I'll answer them in the session. But also, I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to ask you to engage and for you to do some work. So please have pen and paper or finger and iPad, whatever you use, ready to do some work, because that's how you'll get the best value from the session. And the third thing is I really want to give you some practical actions that you can take away and put into practice. Okay, so we're talking about customers, and I'm going to frame this around the 5 major customer trends that are now shaping our world. So let me give you a quick overview here, and then we'll dig into each of them in a little bit more detail. So the first thing is that customers are most social. So they're engaging not just with us on social platforms, but they're engaging with each other. So it's up to us to make sure that we're hanging out in the places where our customers are engaging and talking about us. And the second thing is customers want more personal products and services now. They want more personalization, and not just to be treated as part of a demographic, but to be treated individually. And technology is allowing us to do a lot of that. And the third thing is we know that many customers do care about our green credentials. So they care about climate change, sustainability, the circular economy, and they will do business with you because you've got strong green credentials. And related to that is that customers also expect the businesses that they engage with to be more ethical. So they're thinking about things like diversity and inclusion, both internally and externally, global equity, ethical sourcing, supply chains, and all of those issues can make a difference in where they engage with us later. And the last one is one that I think is pretty obvious, which is digital. And I've put this last, not because I think it's not important. I think it's very important. In fact, it underlines and facilitates and enables all of the other things. So we know that especially as a result of COVID, a lot of our customers have become more digital. They've expected online payments, touchless interactions. They've expected to be able to do online shopping where they may have never done that before. And they expect a whole bunch of other technology. But also digital enables a lot of these other things like social. If you're talking about online platforms, they're digital platforms. So we have to be able to engage in those areas. So what I'm going to do today is go through some of the questions in this self-assessment survey that I've got on my website. So I'm going to recommend to you that as much as you're here live in this presentation, we're going to go through some of the questions. Also, go back later to my website, gihanperera.com, and you can do this free online self-assessment. It takes about 5 minutes to do, and it'll give you an idea of where you're doing well and perhaps areas to improve when you're engaging with customers. Also, I'd recommend that if you're a leader, that you do this with your team as well and ask them to evaluate for themselves. How do you think that we're doing as a team, as a business, as an organization? We're not going to do all the questions in the survey today live, but we're going to do some of them, and it'll give you a flavor of how these 5 major trends are affecting us. So let me start before we get into those major trends. I want to talk about some big picture ideas. And first of all, let me tell you a story. And this is a photograph that I took in Sydney Domestic Airport about 4 years ago. So I was traveling home to Perth, and this is in the Qantas terminal at Sydney Domestic Airport. And the reason I took this photo is this is pre-pandemic, but I saw that in the terminal and in the Qantas lounge upstairs, there were all these big ads for GoToMeeting. This is before Zoom became really big, and GoToMeeting was, and actually still is, one of the biggest online collaboration platforms around. And the reason I took this photo is I thought, isn't it really interesting that Qantas is allowing one of its biggest competitors to advertise on their property? See, they'd never allow Virgin to advertise in the Qantas terminal, but as far as they were concerned, GoToMeeting was just a really valuable tool that some of their customers, especially their high-paying business customers, would find useful. So they were very happy to take their advertising dollars. But of course, customer expectations have changed. And I've shown this photo and I've told this story to people over the last few years. And pre-pandemic, when I told this story, people would say, yeah, Gihan, that's kind of interesting. It's a bit quirky, but what could possibly happen that we'd all stop flying for travel, for meetings, and we'd all be meeting online? And yet that's exactly what's happened. And it's just one example. It's quite an extreme example of how customer expectations have changed. And even though we've now gone back to traveling and meeting in person, online meetings and online events are never going to go away. So I've been doing presentations like this, online presentations, since 2009. So for more than a decade now. But it's only in the last few years that it's become really mainstream, and everybody understands what they are. So they will never go away either. Okay, so a couple of things. So let's do the first bit of the survey. So in this survey, each of the questions that I'm going to share with you has a rating for you to rate yourself, 0, 1, or 2. So 0 means no, we don't do this, or we do this very poorly. 1 means we do this okay sometimes. 2 means, yep, we're absolutely on top of this. And I recommend for this, given that you're doing this privately for yourself, that for each of the questions, be a bit tough on yourself. It's okay to rate yourself a 1 instead of a 2, and only rate yourself a 2 if this is something that you feel is really strong in your team, in your organization. Okay, so here's the first of the questions. We know and understand who our ideal customers are. Okay, and the second part is we tailor our offerings to them, but the first thing is that we know and understand who our ideal customers are. And keeping in mind that your ideal customers from 5 years ago might not be your ideal customers now and into the future. For example, if you've got younger customers that you want to reach, they may not have purchasing power before, but they may be a demographic that you might now want to reach in the future. So give yourself a rating from 0, 1, or 2. The next one is a really important one. We know the problems that we're solving for our customers. And in brackets, we solve them. But the main thing is that we actually know what problems we're solving for customers. We'll dig a bit deeper into that a little bit later. But I think you should have some sort of gut feel at the moment that you actually know what problems you're solving or what goals you're helping your customers achieve. I'll give you a couple of examples soon. And the third one, before I give you the examples, is that a customer's journey might have changed. Customer's journey is what they're doing in their life, and they engage with us at one or more points along that journey. And that journey might have changed. And so we've adapted to match. For example, the obvious one is in the pandemic, there were people who had to be in lockdown, couldn't go out. So for a restaurant, their customer journey in the past used to be people would book, they'd turn up at the restaurant, they'd enjoy a nice meal, and they'd have the experience, and then they'd go home. During the pandemic, that journey changed, and many restaurants pivoted and scrambled very quickly to offer takeaway. And so it was a very different customer journey that they were then being a part of. And again, that will never go away completely. So let me give you some really specific examples of how customer journeys have changed and how customer problems have changed. So at the moment, you should have had 3 questions. Let me show them to you again. We know and understand our ideal customers. We know what problems we solve for them, and we know how our customer's journey has changed. Let me give you some examples. So the Boston Symphony Orchestra, some years ago, they were looking at increasing their membership of their audience. So some people just buy tickets to a concert, others become members of the orchestra, not actually playing and performing, but they become members, which means they get access to a whole bunch of membership benefits. So they pay an annual fee and they can go to as many concerts as they want, as well as a whole bunch of other privileges of membership. And the BSO wanted to increase their membership. So what they did was they offered a free concert to anybody who'd never seen the Boston Symphony Orchestra live in concert. Free concert, come along, no strings attached. And then what they would do was then after the concert, they invited them, or they sent out an offer for them to sign up and subscribe as members. And what they found, they were quite disappointed with the response, because they found that many people didn't want to become members, more than they expected. So they got fewer subscriptions than they were hoping for. So they did the right thing. What they did was they sent out a survey afterwards, and they said, if you don't want to become a member, can you please tell us why? Is it because you found that you actually didn't like classical music, or that the subscription was too expensive, or whatever it was? You didn't like the acoustics in the concert hall, and they asked them what were the reasons. And you know what the number one reason was? That people said that they didn't want to subscribe because they couldn't find good parking near the concert hall. See, the regular concert goers knew where to find the good parking, but these people who were there for the first time, they didn't know. They didn't know, so they thought parking would be so difficult that it's not worth the bother of having access to the BSO's concerts, because it'll just be too much of a hassle to get there. If they hadn't asked the question, they would never have guessed that was the answer. So that was a problem that they had to solve before they could get more subscribers. Here are a couple of, here's one COVID example. This happened with Singapore Airlines in 2020. Most of his fleet was grounded, as with most airlines. And Singapore Airlines said, what can we do for our customers? And they realized that there was one group of customers, their premium, like their first class customers, who, as much as they wanted an airline to take them from A to B, because that's the core business, they also wanted a luxury premium experience. So Singapore Airlines had this offer for people living in Singapore. You could pay $900 and you could have somebody, a chef, come to your house and cook you a fine dining meal for 2. Served on beautiful Wedgwood china, which you'd get to keep. Also, you'd get all your drinks in this beautiful crystal glassware, which you got to keep. Dom Perignon champagne, everything was put on for you, and that was a night at home when you couldn't go out and you definitely couldn't fly. Because Singapore Airlines realized that one of the problems that they were solving for customers, or one of the goals that some of their customers wanted, was they wanted that luxury experience. So they provided that for $900. Now, Somebody in the apartment down the street might have ordered Uber Eats and they would have had a meal as well, but they were solving a different problem. So Singapore Airlines said, what problem are we solving for customers? And this was something that they hadn't done pre-COVID, and COVID had changed their customers' expectations. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a poll here. And the question is very simple. COVID-19 has made our customers more something. More what? And the answers can vary, and you actually get the... Okay, so what have we seen? Change our purchase methods, researched, isolated, indulgent. Yep, I think that's very true. Yeah, aggressive is an interesting one. I haven't seen that in the past when I've done this. Busy and stressed. Yeah, so informed and researched, that's really interesting. I think that what happens is when there's a crisis, people start reevaluating everything. So they start thinking about, do we need to be better informed? Do we need to, we're reevaluating and looking at all our choices again. So yeah, thank you for that. Thanks very much for sharing. The 3 questions that I asked you before, to rate yourself on, they're general questions. Now let's look at each of these 5 trends. So if you're keeping score, now there'll be 2 questions in each of these 5 areas. Okay, so the five major consumer trends or customer trends. The first one is that customers are more social. So they engage in online and offline communities. Here's one of them. So this is one that was created by a Malaysian IKEA user. So she set up a website called IKEAhackers.net. So she loved IKEA furniture and IKEA products, and she set up a website where she initially contributed her own ideas about how she was using IKEA products in interesting ways. And then she opened it up for other people to contribute their ideas as well. And they created this website, IKEAhackers.net, where people from all around the world would contribute their ideas and then show photos of them using IKEA products in interesting ways. And IKEA heard about this. And what do you think they did? Well, the first thing they did was they got their lawyers onto her and said, you're using our trademark without permission, take down the website. And she wanted to comply, so she wrote to all her community and said, I'm really sorry, but IKEA's got in touch with me. We have to take down the website. And all her community got outraged by it. They all wrote to IKEA and said, what are you doing? And IKEA, fortunately, they saw the light and they completely reversed their decision, and they wrote to her and said, we're so sorry. There's a complete mistake on our behalf. We love having people like customers like this who really support us, and please keep the website, and what can we do to help? Okay, so but this is an example of customers of a traditional retail company who have created a community for themselves. And the thing is now that your customers are in communities. They're talking about you. The question is, are you listening? So the 2 questions that I've got for you here is, first of all, give yourself a rating. Do you know where your customers hang out? And it doesn't only have to be online communities, it could be offline communities as well. So do they hang out on a particular Facebook group? Do they hang out in a community that you've created for them online? Do they hang out in airline lounges or in parents meetings at schools? So where do they hang out? Because what you want to do is make sure that you're part of that conversation as well. Not as a pushy intruder, but as part of that community. So that's the first question I'd like you to rate. The second one is, can you do even better, and can you host that community? So do you have an active community of customers who are not just engaging with you, but who are helping each other, that they engage because they've got that commonality with you, but they can even solve problems for you. Okay, so those are the 2 questions to ask yourself. Okay. Great. I hope you have the chance to rate yourself on those. We'll do one more now. We'll do the next one, which is around personal, and then I'll stop to see if there's any questions. So if you've got any questions, type them in the chat room, and when I stop after the next one, I'll address any questions that have come through. Okay, so I see a question about, do you get access to the slides of the recording? You do get the recording, absolutely. And also these slides here are actually questions from the online survey. So if you do the online self-assessment, you absolutely get all of these questions, and you can rate yourself and ask your team to rate your team as well. Okay, the second one is that we expect now for things to be more personalized. So it's kind of going back to those olden days where you lived in a small town and you'd go down to the one and only local store, and the storekeeper would know exactly everything about you. They'd know what you buy, they know what your preferences are, they know when you're probably out of a product, and they can recommend that you buy this. They know what to replace it with. They know what's going on in your family. They know your kids, and so they have that really personal relationship. We don't have that now when we've got this mass marketing, but digital technology, things like artificial intelligence, do allow us to personalize now. I'll give you an example of this. So this is an example of a company in Scandinavia that has set up a startup. It's a startup company that set up an app. And what they do is they get access to your bank records with your permission, and they can analyze your credit card transactions, and based on that they can recommend, they measure and they monitor and they recommend places where you can buy ethical and sustainable products, or use ethical and sustainable purchases based on your purchasing habits. So this is for customers who actually do care about, we'll talk about environmental and ethical soon, but they care about those issues. And this startup company, you subscribe to the service and they get access, you give them access to your banking transactions, especially your credit card transactions, and they will personalize their recommendations for you. Now here in Australia, we do have, by law, we have this concept called open banking, where banks are required by law, they're forced to give access to apps like this with your permission as a customer. But in the past, like those banking records, those credit card statements, and all the transactions, that's a huge amount. It's a gold mine of information. And in the past, banks didn't have to give that away. In fact, they could sell that because that was such valuable information. Now they have these open banking laws, which mean they have to provide access. And this startup took advantage of that. Okay, so that's an example of personalization. It doesn't mean that you have to build an app, but my two questions for you around this, the first one's this: do you engage with customers in the ways that suit them, not only the ways that suit us? So especially like if you're working with, say, the Generation Y or Generation Z, so 40 or younger, they don't want to ring a call center. They don't even want to answer the phone. So they want to engage with text messaging, with TikTok, on Twitter. They want to make their customer complaints using those sort of platforms. And are you engaging with them the same way? Do you have an app, for example, if you know that that's the way that they want to engage, rather than only the way that you want to engage with them? And the next one is this: that is not only during the transaction, during the sale, but also do you have your after sales touch points that are customized and personalized for your customers? So again, like, do they want to receive emails from you afterwards, giving them other offers? Do they want to? Would they rather receive SMS messages, text messages? So for me, I'm happy with the people that I do business with. If they want to send me offers later, if they send it by email, fantastic. If they send it by text, I don't want them to do that. But that's me. Other people might feel differently. Okay, so how do you rate yourself there? Okay, so those are two questions around personalization. There's a lot more that we can talk about that in detail, but for now, this is good enough. Okay, so we've looked at the first two here, and I hope you've given yourself a rating in those first two areas, plus there's 3 questions at the start. So before we get on to environmental and ethical, because they're kind of related, let me see, does anyone have any questions around anything that we've covered so far? Okay, I don't see any questions coming in yet, but you'll get another chance later. So as I said, if you've got questions, type them in the chat and I'm happy to answer them as we go. Okay, so these things around social and personal, both of these have been accelerated as a result of the pandemic. So COVID-19 has meant that people have spent more time online because you couldn't spend more time offline. So it meant that there's a lot of these social networks, social platforms, and communities formed and accelerated during the pandemic. Same with personal, like people. I wouldn't say we're post-pandemic yet, but in our living with COVID world, people want to spoil themselves now. They want to travel again. They want to meet in person. I'm finding this now where I'm speaking at events, and when people book me as a futurist, of course they want to know about future trends and leading in uncertainty, but they also say this is the first time in 2 years that our people are getting back together. So they're also there for the networking and the fun, and they want me to be engaging and funny, and it's good. I can do that. But I'm hearing more of that now than I did, say, 3 years ago. Okay, Natalie. Oh, Natalie says, a great example of a personal touch I got working with you. Invitations to these presentations. Yeah, very engaging. Yeah, thanks. So not everybody gets these invitations. You have to kind of opt in through LinkedIn or been to one of these presentations before, or you subscribe to my general newsletter. But again, I respect some people want the invitation, some people don't. If they unsubscribe, then I don't send them more invitations. And I could be even more personal. I could have an SMS database of people who've subscribed, and I could send them the invitation by SMS. And yeah, so there's a lot more that every one of us could do. Okay, good. Let's continue. Let's look at the next one. So our timing is going very well. Okay, environmental and ethical. I'm going to kind of look at these together because they're quite distinct, but in many ways they're related. So one example is that many organizations now are making decisions around sustainability, climate change, the circular economy, and so on. And we're seeing here in Australia, in the eastern states, that at the moment there's massive problems with power, with electricity, and part of that is due to sustainability issues because we don't have renewables that are reliable enough yet, or continuous enough yet to be able to manage and to take up the load when other things reduce, and there are external factors. So in Japan's 3 biggest banks have said we're now not going to invest in any new coal mining projects. There's a big insurance company, Allianz, I think, that has also said we're no longer going to insure new coal-fired projects around the world. So this is something that's a big area now, and many customers are looking at that. And we know this is true not only in the commercial world. In Australia, in our new parliament, we have a number of seats that were from independents who were supporting climate change and sustainability, and the Australian electorate voted them in, which I think is a really positive thing. Here's another example of a commercial organisation. And by the way, when I'm showing some examples of apps here, I'm not in any way suggesting that you need to build an app for your business. These are just examples of businesses that have done that. This is one that allows businesses to put QR codes on their products, and when somebody snaps a QR code, instead of going to, like what we did, instead of going to a poll or going to the business's website, it goes to information about how the product was sourced, all the way through from initial manufacturing all the way through to retail. And it uses blockchain technology to trace the supply chain. So this is something that, again, like 5 years ago, there were few people talking about this, but now there is actually possible. And by the way, whenever you see the words like platform, a platform means that it's available to many businesses. So it's something that a business can subscribe to. So if you're a business and you sell some product and you want to have QR codes on your product so that customers can trace the supply chain using blockchain, you don't need to build that technology yourself. This platform is there for you. You can subscribe to it just like you subscribe to Netflix, and you have access to it for a monthly fee. And you'll see many of these platforms now, and that's one of the biggest changes that's happened, like behind the scenes, is that we've got more platforms now that businesses can tap into and get access to really sophisticated technology, whereas in the past you had to build it yourself. So for example, my first business was as a web designer, and we used to have to build websites from scratch for people. It would cost about $5,000 for a small business, it would take about 3 months, and it would require a lot of technical expertise. And now you can go to, for example, a place called strikingly.com, for example, and you can build a website for yourself within an hour or two, which was as good as the websites that we could build 25 years ago. And it would cost you it's actually free, but if you want to get rid of the advertising, it's like $100 a year. So because you've got these platforms. Okay, so if you want access to some of these things, these platforms are available. Okay, here are my two questions for you. So do you, as an organization, genuinely care about things like climate change, sustainability, the circular economy, your green credentials? And the second thing is, if you know that your customers care about these things, are you making that prominent? Are you talking about this? Are you saying and giving customers a way to see and to verify your green credentials? Okay, so there's the two questions. Let me go back to this one before. I didn't give you much time on that one. So rate yourself 0, 1 or 2 on that one. And on the next one, rate yourself on that. Do you promote your goals and activities? Just a warning around this. Actually, I'll talk about that. I'll give you the warning after the next one as well. So the next one is related to this. It's around ethical practices. So it's, again, related to big picture issues, but it's not specifically climate change and sustainability. It's around the way that you treat your employees, the way that you source your products. Do you do it in an ethical way? Do you look after people on the other side of the world who might be manufacturing or growing some of the ingredients for your products, and so on? Okay, and this is a significant change now, and some customers care a lot about this. This is Jeff Bezos. He's the former CEO of Amazon, but the founder of Amazon. And he was asked in an interview some years ago, he was asked, what do you see is changing in the future? What are some of the things that you can tell us? What are your predictions about what's changing? And one of the things he said was, look, I can tell you about that, but I also think an interesting question is, what's not changing? What will never change? And he said this. He said, for example, I can't imagine that sometime 10 years from now, a customer is going to come up to me and say, you know, Jeff, I love Amazon, but I just wish your prices were a little bit higher. And he said that's not going to change. Now, actually, so I think Jeff Bezos has a bit more money than I do, but I disagree with him about that. Some customers actually do care, and they're okay with raising prices. For example, here's a pottery company in the USA called East Fork, and when they raised their prices last year, their customers said, fantastic, we love it, thank you so much for doing that, because they raised their price and they said, cost of living has gone up, we want to raise our prices so that we can pay our staff a higher wage. And their customers loved it. They loved them more for doing that, even though it was coming out of their wallets and purses. So this is one of the changes that's happening now, and many organizations are doing things that in the past they would have been seen as this is wrong because this is not increasing shareholder value, and it's not we don't care about it's not affecting our bottom line in a positive way, so we shouldn't be doing it. Now people are saying we don't care only about your bottom line profitability, we care about your ethical practices as well. Here's another example. So Unilever knows that there's a lot of value in marketing to kids because kids have a lot of influence over their parents, but they've now said we're not going to market to kids under 16 any of our food and beverage products. Alaska Airlines recently they have changed their uniform and grooming code because they care about gender identity and sexual identity, gender fluidity, and they say this is an important thing for us, and so they make that front and center. Okay, so my two questions around this. This is an interesting one, and I think this is a challenging one. Do you have diversity in your organization, especially at leadership levels? Because if your customers are diverse, if your employees are diverse, then it makes sense that your leadership should be diverse as well. And in the past, maybe you could get away with the argument that the people with the most experience, the older men, were the best people to be at the top of the leadership chain. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I'm saying maybe you could get away with that argument because they were the people who'd always done it, who'd always been the leaders, and therefore their experience counted for a lot. It's just not true anymore, because what the experience in the past doesn't automatically mean that you're going to be a good leader for the future. Because not because you're a bad leader, but because the world has changed. So you need diversity in your organization. And then how many people could honestly say, yes, we've got that diversity? You could score 2 out of 2 in this one. And the next one is that in your marketing and everything in your customer-facing touch points, it appropriately reflects the diversity of your customers. So it's no longer good enough for fashion brands, for example, to only have white people in their marketing, and especially like white people who have a certain size and shape, body shape. Now you have to be more diverse, and rightly so. And the warning I was going to give you around climate change and sustainability also applies to this area around ethical marketing and ethical practices. Is you can't do this, you can't pay lip service to this, because our customers are more social now and they have places to engage and they communicate with each other. They're more influential than ever before, and it's easy to get called out if you don't do things the right way. So just be careful. You absolutely, if you care about sustainability, environmental and ethical issues, absolutely talk about them, but do it because you absolutely do care about it, and not just because you think it's good. It's a good marketing opportunity. It's a good PR exercise. Okay, so let me stop again to see if there's any questions, and then we'll do the last one around digital. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on digital. In fact, I want to do another quick exercise before we get to digital. So any questions? Let's see if anything coming through. And I'll get something ready while we're doing that. Okay, let's talk about digital. But before we get to that, because as I said, digital is it facilitates and enables all of these other things. So I don't need to go into a lot of detail about that. But I wonder if I can come back to something that I said very early on in this session, is what problems do you solve for your customers? So problems is like a shorthand for like what do you do for your customers, right? But I actually think there are 6 things that you could do. There's 6 levels, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. But I wonder which of these 6 things do you do for your customers? And it's useful to know where you fit. And by the way, there's no value judgment attached to these, but these are kind of like from low level to high level, depending on customers' needs. So as I sketch out what these 6 are, think to yourself, in your business, in your organization, what do you most do for your customers? So one is crisis. So some customers got an emergency, they need help straight away. Are you involved in helping them manage that crisis? The next one is problems. So do you solve a particular problem for a customer? It might not be at crisis level, but you're solving a problem for a customer. They need some help with something, they need something fixed. What can you do for them? And it could be a product or a service. So this is kind of the traditional way of thinking about marketing. Find your customers' problems and solve them. And the next one is kind of the positive spin on that. It's sometimes not about problems. It might be about goals. So customers have got some goals. So I know that some financial planners solve problems. So the problem that the customer might have is we need to put our super somewhere and we don't know where to put it. So can you help us with that? Others say other financial planners actually actively help their customers with their goals. We know that in 5 years' time, daughter is going to graduate from school and we want to help her, support her through her university degree. So how can we set up our finances to achieve those goals? We know that in 10 years' time, we want to buy a new house. We know that in 3 years' time, instead of selling a car, we want to hand it down to our son who's going to get his driver's license. So that's a very different outcome based on what kind of financial planner you are. The next one's opportunity. So these are, if you like, goals that customers didn't even know they wanted. So when Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, nobody knew that they wanted to have a computer in their pocket that they could carry around with them all day, every day. And yet Apple was presenting them with that opportunity. Okay, so crisis, problems and goals, customers know they've got them. Opportunity, they don't know. And the next one is values. So do customers do business with you because they're aligned, or you're aligned with their values? So again, things like, do they care about climate change and sustainability? And do you care about climate change and sustainability? So therefore, they'll do business with you. Or the opposite, they won't because you don't. And the top one is mission. So do they care about your mission? So the difference between values and mission is that if you're on a mission to make the world a greener place, as opposed to that we support climate change and sustainability goals, so mission is stronger. So some people will support you and buy from you and do business with you because they absolutely are on the same mission as you are, or they strongly support your mission. So if I ask you just very quickly in the chat room, can you just type in one word to say which of these 6 things your business and your organization does? So in terms of your customers, do most of them care about crisis they're in, solving a problem, achieving a goal, seeing some brand new opportunity, aligned with your values, or they really care about your mission? Okay, so I see problems coming in. Yeah, interesting. So Sue, for example, I think in travel, yeah, there's definitely opportunities that people would not have thought about, right? Problems, crisis. Yeah, so interesting, right? So it's interesting to see the range of things here. And as I said, there's no right or wrong answer to this. Franz, the first person who said values or mission, and there's no judgment around this. Tony says, oh, 4 of these. Okay, so again, there's no judgment attached to this, but it's useful to know what you're doing, because the products, the services, and the processes that you use will vary depending on what you're doing for your customers, for your ideal customers. So just keep that in mind. And if you haven't done this exercise before to figure out which of these 6 levels you're at, I think you should. Because it might be quite different now. In the same way as I said that people have problems when they book a keynote speaker. They want to know about the future, but they also want somebody who's entertaining and engaging at their conference. So it may have been primarily problems before, but now there are goals and opportunities that a conference organizer or a client has when they want to book a speaker, because customers have changed and the environment has changed. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so the last area, which I won't go into a lot of detail because we could do a whole session around this, and I do have a whole program around digital, is this idea that our customers are more digital now. And I've been telling this story for a long time. I just realized recently that this is the 20th anniversary of this story, this thing that happened. So artificial intelligence allows us to be more personal, more social, and more engaging with our customers. This is something from 20 years ago, at the turn of the century. Whoever thought we'd say that? At the turn of the century, Target in the USA, they were using artificial intelligence with their customers, and there was a bit of a controversy because a Target store sent this girl at her home, and she was about 16, sent her a catalogue addressed to her because she was a Target customer who'd signed up, addressed to her, and in the catalogue it had baby products, and her parents were angry, and the dad went to the Target store and said, what's the point of this? What are you doing here? You're sending my daughter a catalogue with baby products in it. She's a teenager. Do you want to get her pregnant? And it turned out that she was actually pregnant. She actually was pregnant. She just hadn't told anybody yet. But Target systems, looking at what she was buying, was able to determine that she was buying products that a young pregnant woman would be buying. And so it was a controversy at that time, because this was one of the earliest uses of AI by businesses to be able to personalize and target and tailor their marketing. And this is a big area that many organizations are doing now. You know this if you've gone to Amazon and it said customers who read this book also read this, because it's recommending things based on other people's patterns as well as your own. And so my two questions around this. This is digital, not AI specifically. Do you actually give customers as many digital engagement options as possible when dealing with you? So give yourself a rating, 0, 1 or 2. And the second one is around AI. Do you use AI to personalize and tailor marketing, sales, products, services? And actually I asked you the question earlier, do you also use it to tailor your after-sales support and marketing? Okay, so rate yourself on those. Okay, thank you everyone. We've come to the end of our time. We're just pretty much right on time, just a couple of minutes over. As I said, if you want to do the full survey, it's free, it's open, it takes about 5 minutes to do. Go to gihanpereira.com and you can do that full survey. I've picked, we did about, I guess about 2/3 of the questions here today. So there's a few more in there. There's 20 questions in total, and we did 13 of them here today. So go there and do it for yourself. You get a rating, and you also get some recommendations for each one of the questions, depending on your response. So please go and do that. Also, if you want to engage with me, I have a keynote presentation called Customers on Your Side for conference keynotes, and I also run masterclasses around this and help you if you're a leadership team and you're doing some strategic planning. I can help you with that as well, and give you some external ideas around some of the trends that you can then feed into your strategic planning. And if you want to get engaged with me on any of my leadership programs, you can do that as well. So all of that is available at gihanpereira.com. As many people know, I often finish my presentations with this. Don't wait for all your ducks to line up in a row. Don't wait for everything to be perfect. The world is not going to wait for you. So start before you're ready, and that's the best way to be fit for the future. Thanks everyone for being here today. Thanks for engaging and taking part. I hope you got some value that you can take away and put into action as soon as possible. Stay safe and healthy. I'll see you in the future. Bye for now.